Something that a lot of Lord of the Rings fans don't know about Tolkien's original epic saga is that Sam not only wore the ring during his rescue of Frodo in the Tower of Cirith Ungol, but he also was tempted by the ring as he stepped past the threshold into Mordor. The reason these details are unknown for a lot of people is because Peter Jackson had to shrink down this massive event to just a few short minutes. We miss out on Sam's true battle with the orcs in the tower, his use of the ring and the Phial of Galadriel to get past the Watchers, and his and Frodo's escape of the tower, which wasn't just as easy as walking out. In fact, they had a Nazgul on their tail. So in today's video, I'm going to take this scene in the movie and compare it side by side with the original chapter in the book so that together we can discover every change, revision, and omission that Peter Jackson had to make for the film. My name is Gibby and welcome back to episode 43 of Movies vs. Manuscripts Lord of the Rings edition. This is the show where I compare the Lord of the Rings film trilogy to the original books and find all the differences along the way. Before we jump into the scene recap and analysis, I wanted to give a shout out to this commenter from a previous episode. Each week, I highlight one of the top comments from a past episode, so be sure to share your thoughts down below when you're done watching. Also, by the time this is published, we as a community should be at almost 100,000 subscribers, or we may have already passed it. I can hardly believe it as I say it, and I've got a special announcement later in the video to celebrate this milestone, so stay tuned for that. Per usual, I'll cover all the changes across the 4 major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But first, let's recap what happened in this scene of the movie so it's fresh on our mind for the changes. Picking up with where we last left Sam and Frodo, the movie zooms in on the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and we see Frodo at the very top as he wakes up from being poisoned. He realizes that he has been stripped and looted, and he feels for the ring, which is gone. As he is lying there, however, the 2 orcs watching him get into a fight over his mithril shirt, which one of them says should go to Sauron, but the other wants to keep it for himself. This fight spills out to the level below, and after just a few seconds, the whole tower is in chaos as all the orcs start fighting each other. As this fight is going on, Sam is walking up to the tower, and by the time he gets to the door, all of the orcs are dead, and he just walks right in. Eventually, after making his way through the tower a bit more, he runs into multiple orcs who begin to back up as they see his massive shadow. But then once he emerges, they come forward to fight him and quickly lose. The movie then cuts back to Frodo, who is trying to get out of the rope that is binding his hands, but one of the orcs from earlier comes up to kill him. Thankfully, before the orc can, Sam stabs him through the back and saves the day. Sam then reveals that he still has the ring and is reluctant to give it back, but he eventually does, and Frodo puts it around his neck. Then, after changing into orc garb, the 2 hobbits walk right out of the tower and into Mordor, where they can see the whole land before them. And that is where we'll end the scene for this week. So to start, let's cover our first 3 categories of characters, timeline, and location. First, for characters, we have 1 character we're missing and 2 characters who are kind of wrong. As for who we're missing, that would be Snaga, an orc under the command of Shagrat, the captain of the tower. And we'll talk more about Snaga and the plot changes. In regards to who is changed, we sort of have a character swap between Shagrat and Gorbag. In the book, these 2 orcs are the captains of their respective units. Shagrat is the captain of the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and Gorbag was leading a troop which came up from Minas Morgul to check the stairs out and make sure there were no spies there. These 2 units collided when they found Frodo, and so Gorbag and Shagrat were in charge of the spoils. And what's weird in the movie is that they completely swapped these 2 characters' personalities and roles in the story. In the book, Shagrat is the one who is following the rules. All the spoils go to the Eye, and the prisoner remains unharmed. Gorbag is the one who wants the mithril shirt for himself. But if you go on Google and you search up these characters, they are named opposite in the movie. The movie names Gorbag as the rule follower and Shagrat as the one who wants the mithril vest. But then it gets even more confusing because later in this scene, the rule follower is the one who climbs up and tries to kill Frodo. He switched up awfully quick. Then the orc in the movie, who escapes with the vest, seemingly for himself, must have actually taken it to Barad-dûr, because at the end of the movie, the mouth of Sauron shows the vest to Gandalf and company at the Black Gate. It's all a weird mashup of these 2 characters in the book who are very cut and dry in their purposes. I'm not really sure why it got so confused for the film, and it's probably confusing just listening to me talk about it, but oh well. Now, the reason I could spend some more time talking about that today was because our timeline and location categories pretty much get a pass. Technically, the movie omits the Underway and Undergate, but we still see the tower itself, so it's still pretty accurate. Typically, after those changes, I would promote Audible here, and yes, you can still go sign up using my link in the description if you want to, But today, I actually wanted to mention something way cooler, and that is that next week, if you're watching this the week it comes out, I will be doing a 100,000 subscriber live stream. That's right, we'll play games, talk a bit, and there might even be some giveaways and prizes. Plus, I have an announcement during that live stream that you won't want to miss, so mark it on your calendar, April 12th at 10 a.m. EST. Yes, it will take the place of our regularly scheduled Movies vs. Manuscripts, but I think you'll enjoy the live stream more, so I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get into the plot changes. The first thing we need to address is the start of the chapter, which is removed from the movie. In the movie, they jump straight into the action with Frodo waking up, the orc fight starting, and then Sam walking in after it's finished. But in the book, we read about everything from the time Sam woke up outside of the Undergate of the Stronghold to the time that he and Frodo left it. So here's what we miss in the movie. Sam wakes up outside of the Undergate as he must have knocked himself unconscious or just passed out from the weariness of throwing himself against the door. He then pieces together the events that had transpired and determined that he must go back to find the main entrance. This meant that he had to grope along the dark tunnel he was in until he got back to where Frodo's body had lain before, and then from there he found his way to the front gate. However, in order to get there, he used the ring once again, just to be safe so he wouldn't be seen. He then crept along the front gate and began to hear noise coming from that direction. At first he thought it was another orc pack coming to search, but then he realized soon after that it was fighting coming from the tower itself. He continued on, and as soon as he crossed the border into Mordor, he took the ring off. This is an interesting thing because in the book, Tolkien writes that Sam must have taken it off due to some deep premonition, but Sam himself thinks he did it just to see more clearly. And it's a good thing he did too, because as we'll learn in just a moment, putting the ring on in Mordor might be irreversible as the temptation is just too great. Anyway, Sam continued on and we get a description of the land as he looked out and could see all of Mordor and even see Mount Doom itself. As he crept along, he kept thinking about how impossible it would be to get through the front gate and get past the many eyes that must be watching on the wall. And because of this thought, his mind went to the ring. This is where we have Sam's temptation. This is a key moment because it shows that Sam isn't just a regular ring bearer, he's one of the strongest. We read that as Sam's mind went to the ring, it began to tempt him, filling his mind with visions of him striding into Mordor with a flaming sword, defeating the Dark Tower, and then converting Mordor into a massive garden. That's right, Sam's biggest temptation is a massive garden. But what comes after this temptation is more important, as we read that Sam was reminded of his master, and he remembered his garden back home, and he thought to himself that all he needed was a small garden of his own to tend himself, not a massive land to control. He then says, and anyway, all these notions are only a trick. He'd spot me pretty quick if I put the ring on now in Mordor. Personally, I have always been very impressed with Sam and his self-control as he bore the ring into Mordor. Not only does he relinquish it, as we'll see later, but he also is seriously tempted, and many others might have fallen into this temptation, but not our good old Sam. He very quickly just brushes it off as a trick, and I can just see Sauron and his Dark Tower going, "Am I a joke to you?" Anyway, moving on to the next change, we have a small omission, which is that as Sam was looking at the front gate, he watched two orcs run out and then get shot in the back and fall dead. He then continued on, and he thought about what he had heard and seen, and then suddenly it hit him. Frodo's mithril shirt. Sam quickly realized that Gorbag would probably want it and Shagrat wouldn't let him have it, and that caused the fight between the two companies. Then as he got to the front gate, he mustered up the courage and charged in. Or rather, he tried to. That brings us to our next change, which is that Sam actually gets stopped before heading into the tower. So what stops him? Well, just like Minas Morgul had what we call Watchers, the Tower of Cirith Ungol did as well. In the movie, we see Frodo get caught in the glare of the ones at Minas Morgul as he, Sam, and Gollum head to the stairs. Pretty much the same thing happens here as Sam suddenly gets stopped dead in his tracks and he can't move. Thankfully, Sam remembers the Phial of Galadriel, and as if it was calling to him in his time of need, he grabbed it and thrust it out, causing the Watchers to falter and become fearful of him. Then, taking advantage of this moment of pause by these evil spirits, Sam rushed forward and found himself inside the tower. As soon as he got inside, he shoved the Phial of Galadriel back into his shirt, and he felt the Watchers snap shut like a steel door behind him, and a shrill cry went up from the evil statues. Now, our next two changes are regarding Sam's run-in with some orcs as he walks through the tower. First, he doesn't run into multiple, he actually just sees one. And second, he doesn't even fight the one he sees. In the movie, the orcs see his shadow, get scared, and then realize that he's just a small hobbit and decide to stay and fight him. But in the book, Sam is never really seen by the orc. Technically, Tolkien writes that the orc saw Sam, but it didn't see a small hobbit. It saw a silent shape, cloaked in shadow, holding a sword in one hand, with its other hand clutching its breast, holding some hidden power. Of course, this is referring to the ring, and even without Sam wearing it, its power increased in Mordor and was frightening to the orc. So the orc ran off, and Sam chased after him. Which means that our next change is an omission, because after all, Sam has to deal with this orc. In the book, Sam chased after it and eventually lost sight and sound of the creature. He plodded on and continued to search his way up the tower, and eventually he saw a glowing light coming from a room in the fortress. And as he crept up, he heard orc voices talking. Soon enough after eavesdropping, he put together that one of the voices was the orc he had just encountered, and its name was Snaga. The other was Shagrat, the orc captain he had heard the night before when Frodo was taken. During this conversation, Sam learns that Snaga believes he is a great elf warrior, or a man of high blood like a Númenórean. He also learns that Shagrat is injured, but that doesn't stop Shagrat from trying to kill Snaga as the orc refused to follow his orders and go back out. Snaga quickly scampered off and Shagrat attempted to chase him, but eventually stopped. Sam then watched as an orc body on the ground began to move, but Shagrat was too quick and knifed the moving orc, who Sam quickly learned was Gorbag. Shagrat then finished off Gorbag, and then Sam, realizing he couldn't leave without being seen, decided to jump out at him. After this sudden move, Shagrat was caught off guard, and decided in a split second that he couldn't fight, so he tossed a bundle of something at Sam, knocking him back, and then ran off. Sam quickly recovered and chased after Shagrat, but then realized that his duty wasn't to chase him, but to save his master. So, forsaking the chase, he turned around and headed back up into the tower. By the way, the movie does kind of show Shagrat escaping with the mithril vest, but obviously it doesn't show Sam chasing him. Anyway, now we're on to the next change, as the movie quite quickly shows Sam popping up into where Frodo is and saving his life, but it's a little more complex than that in the book. In fact, Sam doesn't even find where Frodo is located at first. We read that Sam searched everywhere he could and eventually gave up hope as he had no sign of his master anywhere. So he sat down in the darkness and began singing. Yep, in typical Hobbit fashion, Sam began to piece words together and sing louder and louder in his despair. And lo and behold, this Hobbit style is what saved the day, as he suddenly heard a response. Although muffled and quiet, he definitely heard something. Then he stopped singing and listened, and yes, he heard a noise again, but this time it was Snaga, the orc coming to shout at Frodo, who was held right above Sam. In the darkness, Sam couldn't figure out where Frodo was, and this whole time he was being kept in the topmost part of the tower, which was only accessible by ladder through a trapped door. And after this singing, which Frodo responded to, Snaga went out to check on the prisoner. So after Snaga put up the ladder and went to Frodo, Sam hurried up and didn't stab him, which is our next change. The movie simplifies this moment even more by making this a quick stab and he's done. But in the book, Snaga whips Frodo for good measure, and then before he can whip him again, Sam sliced at the orc's hand. Snaga and Sam then get into a wrestling match essentially, which ended with Snaga falling through the trapdoor and snapping his neck on the ground below. Now this also means we have two other small changes. First of all, in the movie, they have Gorbag be the one who goes back to Frodo, not Snaga. Second, Snaga in the book doesn't try to kill Frodo as Gorbag does in the movie. He just whips him. But now we come to our next change, when Frodo and Sam reunite. In the book, they talk for a bit as Frodo comes to his senses and realizes he isn't dreaming. Then he tells Sam that the orcs took everything, and Sam says, well, not everything, and tells him about the ring. In the movie, Frodo asks for the ring, but is pretty chill about it. In the book, however, Frodo actually lashes out and quickly asks for it back, and at one point he even calls Sam a thief. Soon after getting the ring back around his neck, he comes back to his senses and starts apologizing profusely to Sam for how he lashed out there. It's nothing like the calm, cool, collected Frodo that they show in the movie. Another small detail that isn't so much a change but sort of a similarity between the book and movie is that Sam tells Frodo they're now in Mordor and the ring will be harder to bear. He then says that if Frodo wants, he can help share the responsibility. That's when Frodo calls him a thief, and I couldn't help but notice that perhaps this moment is what they used as inspiration for the share the load scene earlier in the movie, which never happens in the book. At least that scene wasn't totally out of left field though, as there is a distinct moment in the book when Sam essentially says he can help share the load. Anyway, that's just a side note that I figured I'd mention. Next, the movie cut out their time of searching for supplies. Sam tells Frodo he can't go into Mordor in nothing but his skin, just like the movie, and then he goes back down the ladder to find clothes. And while he's gone, Frodo finds food, because although the orcs looted his stuff, they didn't touch any of the lembas bread. This is crucial because in the movie, we have no context for them having any food left, but in the book, Tolkien is still aware that they need some sustenance if they're gonna make it to Mount Doom. What they don't have is water, but that'll come up later in the story. Also, a small change is that it looks like Sam undresses and puts on orc clothes as well in the movie, but in the book, he keeps all of his stuff and his backpack with their food and supplies. He tells Frodo that he can't fit orc chainmail over everything, so he simply takes off his Lothlorien cloak and puts on an orc cloak instead, which covers himself and his pack. And then they're ready to set out. And now we've come to the last change for this week's scenes, which isn't a small one. It's actually pretty significant. In the movie, Sam and Frodo literally walk out in the open and continue into Mordor. But in the book, it's clear that reinforcements are going to arrive at any moment, and a signal has definitely been sent out. After all, Shagrat and Gorbag must have sent word that they captured someone near Shelob's lair. So their whole escape from the tower is entirely different in the book. For starters, they have to get past the Watchers once again. Sam knows the trick though this time and pulls out the Phial of Galadriel. He then speaks Elvish, and so does Frodo, similarly to how Frodo did in Shelob's lair, and then they rush out through the gate. As they make it out though, the strength of the battling wills must have been too much for the Watchers, because they sent out yet another alarm and the keystone of the arch crashed down and crumbled. And right as the Watchers wailed, there was a reply, and a Nazgul atop a fell beast swooped down out of the darkness and landed on the wall next to the gate. Frodo and Sam ran as fast as they could and seemingly made it out of harm's way, as the Nazgul must not have seen them. Frodo knew though that the search would begin at any moment, and orcs would quickly come running. He told Sam that them running in the opposite direction would be a dead giveaway, so they must get off the road. Thankfully, they came to a bridge, and right as horns sounded and orcs could be heard in the distance, Frodo and Sam decided to leap from the bridge to whatever doom was below, for they couldn't see clearly what was beneath them. But without any other choice, they dropped off the bridge and fell into the least expected thing in Mordor, a plant. Of course, this plant was not a green, pleasant one, but it had thorns that were massive and poked into their armor and clothes. But that was better than being caught by orcs. So after freeing themselves from the thorns, they got up and continued walking through Mordor. And that is where changes stop for this week. So now that you've heard it all, what do you think of the book compared to this scene in the movie? Were you happy with how these pages were adapted, or what would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments below. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and check out the series playlist to catch up on any episodes you might have missed so far. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.